Welcome to Thinking Green. Tonight's show is about rail transportation in Southeast Connecticut, particularly commuter rail. And I am joined by Mayor Mike Passero and Tim Hanser from City Center District to talk about updates to what's happening with Shoreline East and any other rail-related topics you want to talk about. So welcome both of you. Thank you. Do you want to start out maybe giving some background? I know right before the cameras rolled, Mike was talking about how this has been an ongoing issue since maybe 2009, getting commuter rail to New London. So where have we been and where are we now?
Sure, I have a couple of slides to kind of give the audience a little bit of background on Shoreline East. So if we want to kind of switch to the slides. Or not. So anyway, so this is just a map of what the rail rides goes from New Haven all the way to New London. And the service started in 1990. So it was actually started due to major construction on I-95. So I think that's something we could maybe talk about later about what's going on in the near future with Gold Star Bridge. But it wasn't originally to New London. It only went to Old Saybrook. And it was only 1996 that we started getting some service to New London. But it was still very, very limited.
There was no weekend service for probably a decade.
There was no weekend service at all. It wasn't just to New London, it was to Old Saybrook. The weekend service started in 2008. So it's a fairly recent development with that. And the interesting thing about the weekend service is that New London is really a major destination for weekend service. It's kind of in the middle of the stations in terms of ridership during the week, but on weekends, it's next to New Haven. It's the busiest station. So it's having that weekend service has been really important.
Which makes sense because of the intermodal port.
Yeah, absolutely.
People coming here to get on a ferry to Long Island or to Block Island, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's really, I'm sure we'll talk about it more later, but yes, the fact that this is a transportation hub just makes it all the more important that we receive service.
Right, and so if you look at the ridership, which I have on the screen now, just from 2010 all the way to 2016, you could see every time they expanded service, ridership went up, which isn't surprising. So SailFest, we got the SailFest trains, which was really great. That started in 2011, and that really, like July, just kind of is over and above every other month because of that service.
If I recall, that was like an immediate success.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, without a question. I mean, you just watch the number of people just get dropped off right in the center of SailFest, and it's like, wow, you've got instant crowd. And,
hey, I live in New London, and I wouldn't bring my car to the downtown. Why would anyone else?
Right. And the other one I marked on here was in 2013. They added this midday train, as a noon train out of New London, and that has actually become the busiest train of the day. So it's interesting that this was a service we didn't have, and now it's the busiest one of the entire day. Ridership went down a little bit last year. There's a lot of reasons for it. But we're still, ridership is still pretty strong. We also have market share. We're doing pretty well relative to the other stations. And I think the thing to point out with that is, while we have 11%, 12% market share across the 10 stations, we don't get full service. So I mean, if you look at New London versus the other stations on the line, not all the trains stop here. I mean, Old Saybrook gets 22 trains going towards Old Saybrook on weekdays, and we only get 11. So I mean, we're getting so many fewer trains, yet at the same time, we're getting a big share of that market. So what I think that tells me is that there's demand for ridership in southeastern Connecticut, and really, it would be really nice to see the DOT expand that service further.
And all the way to the Rhode Island border, is that a pipe dream, or is that something we can really think as a possibility in the future?
We had a meeting with Commissioner Redeker last week,
it was actually, the meeting was with the seat board about the future of our, you know, our bus transportation system, which is also important. And I got to tell you, I left the meeting with very little prospects for the future of expansion of our commuter rail, which was sad. But he did. I mean, he is really progressive. I mean, he does understand the need, and he did share the vision of, you know, commuter rail from Providence to you know, filling in the gaps from Providence all the way to New Haven. I mean, it would be the greatest boost to our local economy that anything else could bring, really.
Would it be a tremendous convenience for those of us who live here too? When we go to New York City, or when I go visit the grandkids in Greenwich, we often take the train, and wouldn't it be great if we could do the same, like if we're flying out of Providence?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was funny you say that, because we're flying internationally in a month, actually a month from yesterday, and we're flying out of Boston, and we literally walk out our door, go 3 blocks to the train station, and take the train to Logan, and it couldn't be easier. I was just talking to somebody today at work about it, and how much they really hate the Ted Williams Tunnel, and that's the only way really to get to the airport from this direction. And you know, it's so nice to have that rail option. It's just so much less stress. I mean, airports are stressful as it is. People are getting dragged off airplanes. You know, it's something should be low stress, and if we had that option to Providence, I think it would be great.
You know, I think people in southeastern Connecticut don't really, a lot of them don't even realize it because they've never had it in their life. And I probably wouldn't either, except that I've had a lower office in Milford for 25 years. And the lifestyle there is so different because they're on the Metro North line. And you don't even need, it gets so you don't even need a schedule. You could just, I mean, my law office is was walking distance to the platform, to the train platform in Milford, and you could just walk down there, and you know, the greatest inconvenience would be if you get on a local instead of an express if you want to go to the city. But you know, the transportation options are so great down there.
Yeah, and once any kind of public transportation is coming at least every half hour, you don't have to memorize the schedule. You know that you won't have to wait more than 15, 20 minutes unless you're very unlucky.
Right. I mean, that's one of the successes of CT Fast Track, which isn't rail, but it's bus rapid transit, and I mean, they've exceeded their ridership projections. I mean, they've exceeded them almost instantly. I mean, they're 10 years ahead of their schedule in terms of ridership, and it really shows that when you get frequent service, people will use it.
And that's why seat doesn't work, you know, because they've never been able to afford to get enough buses to be able to run on a frequent enough schedule, so that people don't have to lose hours if they choose that mode of transportation.
And it was quite a shock for us. Before we moved to Southeast Connecticut, we lived in Portland, Oregon for a year, and their public transportation is fantastic, and it's actually gotten better since then with the light rail and the trolleys, in addition to a very regular bus service. And we hardly ever had to drive anywhere. And then coming to Southeast Connecticut and seeing that really only people who really have to take the bus, because it's not convenient enough for the rest of us.
Yeah, it's a big time waster. You know, to take a simple trip could, you know, pretty much take half or all of the day. There's a threat that they're going to move the Department of Labor office to a strip mall in Montville. Have you heard that?
No.
And one of the justifications is that, well, it's on the seat bus line. But yeah, it's on the seat bus line, but a trip to the Department of Labor office, and now most people that office services, including, you know, the rehabilitation services office and all the partners that are in there, don't have transportation.
So this is instead of New London?
Yeah, instead of New London, yeah. It's really a crazy disenfranchisement of the people they serve. But to be able to say that, you know, there is going to be commuter, you know, alternate commuter transit service to that it's absurd. It would take you all day to take a trip to Montville, to a strip mall in Montville on the seat bus. because of the infrequency of the.
Well, maybe if we can get good, like, bike lanes, a person
It would
could
probably-
bicycle
You probably could go faster round
to
trip.
Montville faster than on the bus.
Right. Yeah. It's sad. But, you know, SEAT does provide a very important service for us, and I know we're getting off the trains, but it's really a workforce bus, and it's really only transportation for folks who don't have some other alternative, and that's, so it's just, it's not doing it.
Yeah, no, when I first moved here, when I was working at Pfizer, I really tried to figure out how to take the bus, and one way or the other I can do, like, pretty straightforward, is 25 minutes or so, which is not terrible. But the other one would be an hour and a half. And I couldn't work an 8-hour day because the way the schedule worked out, there was no way to catch a bus and work 8 hours. I think they've changed that was 15 years ago. I think that's expanded a little bit, the service, but I mean, it really shows, Pfizer was at the time a very large employer, and anybody who worked there could not, even if they really wanted to, could not decide to take something besides their car, just because the schedules just are not built for workforce. And that's really the population that it is trying to serve.
And it's terrible because at these big employers, parking is always an issue. So, if we have buses, if we have trains, we can solve multiple problems all at once. Now, do you have any more like facts and figures
No, I
about
don't really have any other
ridership?
slides, other than just to kind of, and we'll certainly bring it up again, but next week,
Wednesday?
when is it? Wednesday. Next
The
week,
19th.
Wednesday, the 19th, the Connecticut Commuter Rail Council has its meeting actually here in New London at 6 p.m. In City Council chambers. They come once a year to New London. It's the only meeting that's east of New Haven, so it's really the only opportunity for anybody in Eastern Connecticut to have to voice their opinion about the rail lines in Connecticut and to really make suggestions about how things can change. The Rail Council is an advisory. They don't have authority to fund different services or anything like that, but they certainly are making efforts to really be the ear, to be the mouthpiece for the riders. So it's kind of the only opportunity we have here in Eastern Connecticut to have that voice.
So in a way, it's the only meeting that really talks much about Shoreline East and is not totally focused on Metro North.
But it's the most important opportunity for people locally here to have their voice heard and to raise raise like a media presence. I mean, if the meeting gets good press coverage, if we can get a lot of people out there, we can raise that issue up to another level. So I think that's a great opportunity.
Now, maybe we can talk a little bit about like how important the rail service is to economic development in New London, both in terms of it being a residential community and also in terms of the commerce here.
I'll tell you what, it's the one piece of our intermodal transportation system that we're really missing. Now all we need to do is connect New London with Providence to the east and New Haven to the west. And
Brattleboro to the north would be nice too, but I do dream.
Yeah, I don't know whatever happened to that discussion, but of course the Genesee and Wyoming line rail bed is being upgraded with
Right.
the Tiger Grant. It's being upgraded for freight service, which is
Which is
really,
great.
really important. I've been getting totally immersed in that. It's another whole rail issue, but that's important because that rail line goes right down to State Pier. So, and State Pier is held back because we don't have a lot of laydown space. But that rail line just opens up the whole country to shipments that come into the State Pier. So once that's upgraded, Riverside Park comes into that too because of the crossover. But I'm getting us off subject again.
But there was an application before the Planning and Zoning Commission maybe 6 or 8 months ago, and businesses that potentially are looking for a location that want to be near the rail line are looking at State Pier because of the upgrades that are going to be happening thanks to the Tiger Grant.
Yeah.
So in terms of the industrial development of that area, it could be huge.
Yeah, it could be. I think it's going to be really huge. And then the timing is perfect because the state just set up the new state port authority, and they're putting money. They just put an initial $4 million into, or awarded them a $4 million grant, the state port authority, for investments solely in state pier. So that's big, and that's just like a down payment. So the timing's perfect on that. And I think probably, having the commuter rail line will fit into that whole thing, the whole mix of the puzzle, because with growth in industry and businesses, you've got employees that need to move around. You have corporate officers that need to move around. It's funny, when I was in Washington for the freight rail conference, Rail Day they called it, I ran into a gentleman who was associated with a company on State Street that was set up as, they do, I'm not going to remember the name of the company now off the top of my head, but they're in the DeWart building, and they do like in the cloud training, corporate training. They run corporate training. It's sort of a nice little niche thing, but the reason they're set up in New London is because it's on Amtrak's line, and they can easily move themselves around, and the people associated with the business, and it's a short work up State Street. And I run into this gentleman in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And we're from the same town, introducing ourselves. So means I need to get out there more often. So set up a meeting with I still haven't got up the street to see him. I think the meeting's coming up next week, but that shows you the possibility. So if you can imagine, and Amtrak isn't the easiest way to get around business-wise, because
or the cheapest.
No.
there's they don't keep to the schedule that well, and it's expensive. It's pricey. It's not like having a commuter rail service. So could you imagine if we had more dependable commuter service, and you could literally get on a train any half hour?
And up the Central Corridor line also provides a lot of access to colleges and universities, in Norwich and Willimantic and Mansfield and northward, which would be tremendous. And you mentioned the schedule and why Amtrak is no substitute for commuter rail. On a snowy day, I don't think it was this past winter, I think it was the winter before, we traveled to Greenwich to visit grandkids. And we were in the Stamford station, and the Amtrak train was something like an hour and a half late. And the Metro North train was right on time, or maybe 2 or 3 minutes late. It really, the schedules are just so much closer to where they're supposed to be in the commuter lines than in Amtrak. An accident in New Jersey can throw off your trip to Boston if you're traveling Amtrak.
And there were 2 derailments this past week in Penn Station, so that created a lot of problems on the line for a lot of commuters.
So, one of the good things that's happening on the federal level is the Kenyon bypass seems to be, on hold or dying a slow death due to political pressure, which is a good thing for us, I think. And as they start to look at other alternatives, for New London, I think, and for our hopes for expanded commuter service, we have to hope that they send those high-speed Amtrak trains up the Hartford line, and up through Worcester, and that alternative. I don't know how you all feel about that, but I think that's the greatest possibility for the line, the shoreline route, to be able to have expanded commuter service if Amtrak isn't, taking up the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree. Part of the problem with the Acela service currently is that there's 20 trains a day and 3 of them stop. Yeah. So we've got 17 trains that are just clogging up, as far as New Londoners are concerned, is just clogging up the line because it doesn't stop. So yeah, you get them off, if you can get them off the shoreline and run them up through Hartford, that opens up, nothing else changing, that opens up 17 slots in a day. And now you're really starting to talk about frequencies that really would drive ridership.
Well, one of the issues with increasing commuter rail was initially, and I'm guessing still is, that the bridge closings are hard on the marine businesses along the coastline, and they have quite a bit of lobbying power. So bringing taking the high-speed rail off of that shoreline route would certainly ease the pressure.
Yeah, well, there's some things that, so that agreement between Amtrak and the marine trades is, I think, it's up pretty soon. And some things have changed since that first agreement has gone in place. One is that the Niantic River Bridge has been replaced. Not only is it higher, but it opens and closes faster. So the impact is much less. And no matter what happens with the NEC future, the Kenyon bypass, there will be a new bridge over the
Saybrook River?
yes, over the Connecticut River.
Yeah, Connecticut River, yeah.
Because that bridge is 100 years old. It is in need of replacement. It's already slated. It was slated before this other project started. And I can only imagine that will open and close faster than a 100-year-old bridge. So some of those things have already improved just by making some infrastructure improvements. So hopefully what we'll see when they open up that proposal, one is I hope that DOT has got a seat at the table, but two, that maybe they're going to allow a little more opening and closing.
DOT is, their budget woes are just, it's staggering to listen to the commissioner talk about the pressures on his operating budget. And at one point we were looking at losing all of our subsidy for seed, and the state subsidizes 70–80% of that. And the balance of it is a burden for the communities that participate, specifically New London and Norwich, which pay most of it. But the prospects of being able to invest more, it's not the capital side of their budget where they're hurting. It's their operating side of the budget. So.
Yeah. No. And before the governor's budget came out, there was every department had to release potential cuts, and there was a discussion of no weekend service on branch lines, and it wasn't clear if the shoreline is considered a branch line. Usually when they talk about an operations, it is a branch line.
Right.
And also I think 50% reduction on the branch lines. So that would have not only would we have lost seat, we would have effectively lost our commuter service as well. So
major step backwards at that. And
at
we're
the
not
very
out of the,
least,
we're not out of the
no,
woods
I
on
mean,
any of that.
The governor's proposal held transportation harmless in that regard, but there's a lot of other
Well,
very
we're not there.
difficult
There's no
pieces.
budget yet.
Right, of course.
And
it won't be for a while.
And the budget also threatens changes to Shoreline East, right, in terms of raised rates and reduced service.
Yeah, and these are just the things that we don't know. I mean, the fares were increased in December. There was a 6% increase in December. I believe they were increased the year before as well. And when your competition is cars and gas prices have actually been dropping, it just makes it harder and harder to convince people to take the train as opposed to driving their car.
So you mentioned, and I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about the Kenyon bypass, especially if it's sort of on hold, but one of the really interesting things about that whole fight was that every shoreline community agreed on it, which I don't
Eventually.
think ever happened. No, right, it didn't
Groton
quite
was a little
start.
slow to the.
Yes,
Slow on the
Groton was a
uptake,
little
yes.
slow. They don't get the show, but then everyone.
Well, they were getting a new train station in the deal.
Yeah, but it's really almost unheard of for New London and all the other suburban shoreline communities being on the same side of an issue. Is there any potential for this newfound alliance to lobby on behalf of commuter rail here?
No, that's a really interesting idea. I don't know enough about some of our new friends in that regard, meaning Old Line. Bonnie Reemsnyder was really, she was really on top of the threat first for different interests than New London. It was going to hurt Old Line for different reasons than it was going to hurt New London, but we certainly became allies in that. But it was the attention she brought to it that made me pay attention. I think made a lot of people in New London pay attention. because it was really a sleeper. They really were doing it sort of quietly, and I don't know how she got onto it, really, but it was a good thing she raised the alarm. But I'm not sure, and I don't know if I know Old Lyme enough to know what their demand is down there for commuter. I don't see why any community wouldn't, even a bedroom community, wouldn't appreciate that, because it attracts, people say you want to work in New Haven or you want to work in New London, but you want a home in Old Lyme. I don't know why you would over a home in New London, but there may be somebody that, as long as they're going to get on the train and come to New London to work, that's fine too.
Sure. Well, I mean, we know Senator Formica is a strong advocate for adding service to East Lyme. So he's been trying to get a station in Niantic. I think there was some conversation at one point about Rocky Neck maybe having a station as well. So that, I mean, I've always thought that having a seasonal station.
At least a seasonal station in Rocky Neck.
It drops you off at the beach.
Right.
I mean, what? Right. That's pretty awesome.
Well, you think about it, with 3,500 people working at the Pfizer's complex now, but what's now EB, 3,500 people. I mean, that would be, if it was a true commuter line, it would certainly stop there, right? With 3,500 people working there.
Yeah. I was on I think it was an Amtrak train.
But just not to interrupt, but could you imagine what that would do for Fort Trumbull and the businesses that would spurt up there if there was a station there?
Well, the Shaw's Cove Bridge at one point when we were headed back from New York City or something had a problem, and we were stuck for about an hour, overlooking Murray Renshaw's shop. And, I kept wanting to just jump off the train and walk home. And so, you go.
They frown on that, actually.
We didn't do that in the end. We got in at 3 in the morning. It was crazy. But just past there on the way to, where Captain Scott's is between, there could be a stop.
No, there's definitely room. I mean, there's no question that there's space. I mean, you've got on both sides of the trestle there. There's room. I mean, it could be done.
If the final holdup to more commuter trains was Shaw's Cove Bridge, then that would be another reason to have the final stop. Sure, our dream is to go to Providence, but if that's not a reality, then at least go to Fort Trumbull and then start back, and you eliminate one obstacle if the problem is the bridge openings.
Now, when it comes to budgets, a lot of people think, oh, I drive, why should I care about rail? So how does developing commuter rail help drivers? How can we get them to buy in?
Well, for one thing, the more people that take the rail makes it easier for the ones that are still driving their car. So I spent 25 years driving back and forth to Milford. Yeah,
I don't envy
it sort of grows on you, but the audience is laughing at that one. But it does sort of grow on you. But I would imagine that
listen to audiobooks or something.
Imus in the morning, NPR mostly, but I would imagine that my life would have been a lot different if I didn't have to, have that car, pay for that car all those years, and I could have just went to the train station in New London and got on a train. In other words, if the lifestyle in New London was the same as the lifestyle in Milford on Metro North, if the commuter rail went the whole length of the coast, life would have been completely different for me because a car wouldn't have been a reasonable option. Right. It's not really a reasonable option in Milford if you're commuting west, because the traffic's horrendous. And if you have the option to walk to the train station and get on the train to go to work, that's obviously that's what most people do.
Well, I think that to kind of, another way to look at the question is, so like Mike said, if you get people onto trains and you have less traffic, it's making it kind of a more pleasant experience, really, for all commuters. But the other piece is that because of traffic levels now, there's been an ongoing discussion about expansion of I-95. Adding a lane of 95 from border to border, not only is that extremely expensive, I can't remember what their estimates were, but I mean, it's in the billions without a question. But it's not only causing more construction and more money associated with the capital and the maintenance, but it's also taking property. It's taking land away from places. New London would probably not lose any land in an expansion because we do have a fairly wide right-of-way.
Right.
But Waterford, it'd be unclear what would happen in Waterford or in Old Lyme, because I know that's one of the concerns Old Lyme has. They have concerns not only about the bypass, but they have concerns about expansion of the interstate.
Well, when they completed the new Baldwin Bridge, right? The oddest thing about that bridge is it's huge. I mean, it's like 4 or 5 lanes, but it immediately goes down to 2 lanes
Yeah.
in Old Lyme, right? So I'm not sure what the point was,
I don't-
unless they're looking ahead to make that highway through Old Lyme quite a
Yeah,
bit bigger.
that's true. And even on the old Saybrook side, it's 2 lanes of highway until you hit Branford. And let me tell you, when you hit Branford and you get another lane, it doesn't make the traffic really seem any better.
Yeah.
No, things move a little better now that the Quinnipiac Bridge project is done.
No, that really
But
was an
that was really
improvement.
that was-
Changing, the new Q Bridge is much better than the old one.
But that
It's like-
needed
it's
to be
just-
replaced.
Now that I'm done driving to Milford, right, I lived with that construction job
That
for,
took forever.
half of my career. But it is beautiful now that it's done. I
It
don't
is.
get down
It is
there very
beautiful.
much anymore.
Yeah, that old bridge, oh man, that was awful. So you mentioned construction and how construction between New Haven and Old Saybrook was one of the motivations for some growth in Shoreline East. Now we are anticipating construction in New London around the Gold Star Bridge and the approach to the Gold Star Bridge. So is that something that we can somehow either exploit to our advantage, or is it just going to be a big mess for us?
Ooh, that's excellent thinking. I mean, I think it would be nice if the state was, number one, thinking, really crunching the numbers and seeing if it isn't a better idea to try to increase the commuter rail than finance improvements to 95 of that magnitude, where you're going to have to, turn it into a much bigger highway. And looking at the mess we're going to have with the bridge reconstruction, I mean, they're basically building a new bridge.
Right.
If you look at their plans for the older
It's
span.
it's the older span that's
the
getting
older-
the
yeah.
northbound one that's getting the major,
Yeah,
more than facelift.
yeah. They're basically replacing the steel structure the way I understand it. So
Just
the road
about,
bit,
yeah.
yeah. So that's going to be a big job, and now's the time to figure out a feasible way to expand the commuter opportunity, through Groton and to the east.
Right. And there is political support for expanded Shoreline East service in Groton and in Stonington. I mean, last year at the Rail Council meeting here, Heather Summers, who's now a state senator representing Groton, was there in support of expansion of service. Rob Simmons, who's the first selectman of Stonington, was there as well, supporting it. If I recall, there was somebody from Westerly as well, somebody from the council in Westerly. So there's political will. I mean, in the case of Stonington and Mystic, they have the station. There's really there's no work to be done, and the same is true for
How
Westerly.
much of I-95 traffic would actually be relieved, especially in the summer, if you had an option to get on a commuter train and go to Mystic?
The beach train.
Yeah, and so many people who come here recreationally, because it is, tourism in summer is a big part of our economy. How many of them would really like to come into our area and not just feel like they have to drive everywhere?
How many, I wonder is there really still a problem with the coves and the bridges that open going from
I
here to
don't
Mystic?
know. That's a
I'm trying
good
to think.
question. I really don't know.
Until you get to the Mystic Bridge, I don't think there's another bridge that has to open.
No, there's no bridge until the Mystic Bridge.
The
There's
train station, unfortunately, is on the other side of
It
the
is. It's
Mystic
on the
Bridge.
Stonington
There's
side.
some at-grade crossings, but that's a different issue. So there are no other bridges.
No.
And yeah, I mean, I think it's worth at least pitching the idea. I'm unfortunately not going to be able to make next week's meeting, but somebody hopefully can at least just say, hey, have you considered, even as a temporary measure, adding service to Groton and Mystic and Westerly even, included in the price of your project? I mean, so from a funding perspective, you have a funding source, because we know that that's a challenge.
Yeah.
And if they can roll that into the project costs, assuming they'd have capacity to do that. To me, it seems like there's no harm in doing a temporary service. It's probably the lowest hanging fruit approach. I grew up in Milwaukee, and there was discussion of expansion of a line in Milwaukee several years ago, and they basically did that. They put provisional stations in a couple spots, extended the line temporarily, ultimately did not fund the permanent expansion, despite it being very popular. But the idea was, it's like basically we have very simple platforms. If anybody recalls what the Westbrook station used to look like, it was a very sorry,
No
like
idea.
it was like scaffolding. It was pretty pathetic. But it was the way it got started, and now that's a full station, and it's benefited from those improvements.
If that could happen, it would be perfect, because the capital side of the DOT's budget is flush with money. The bridge project is funded, and that's one of the problems DOT is having with public perception. They are spending a lot of money, and they have been for years. And the capital side of the budget is in good, healthy shape for all these projects. It's the day-to-day operation part of the operating budget, which is, filling the. I think, I'll probably get these percentages wrong, but I think 60% of it is commuter costs, and 40% of it is just filling potholes and taking care of the road maintenance.
That wouldn't surprise me.
And that's their operating budget, and
yeah.
that's where they're short.
And they have the trust fund, and it's gas taxes and car registration fees go in to fund those things, but they don't come anywhere near meeting the needs. So they're really in a situation where they don't have the ability to even raise revenue, because they can't unilaterally say, well, we'll just raise the gas tax. They can raise fares through a process, but they can't really find new revenues.
What's the latest on the tolls, the toll idea?
I have not heard anything.
The proposal made it out of committee.
Yeah.
I think that's where it sits right now. That was only about 2
And
weeks
are
ago.
they thinking mostly like Port Chester and
The idea is
84 towards Danbury?
the idea is they'd be border tolls. So you do. I don't know if it's at every interstate border for 91, 84, and 95.
I'm sorry, but that seems like a no-brainer to me, because the way somebody explained it to me, the trucks just love going through Connecticut because it's a freebie.
Yeah, Connecticut
Okay.
and Rhode Island's about to put truck tolls in, so they've already approved theirs.
Yeah, so we're just missing revenue, especially for the trucks, and that's unlike freight. The freight infrastructure, which is privately financed for the most part, you get Tiger grants and stuff, but for the most part, it's a great deal of private financing. I don't know what percentage, but the large percent of it is private financing. So that's part of their business model. The trucks just live on free infrastructure. They don't pay, especially when it comes to Connecticut. They're not paying at all to help keep these roads up. But I'm wondering if the toll revenue comes in, can any of that go towards commuter?
I was going to ask what you thought about, the transportation funding lockbox.
Well, it was interesting. So I think both the Democrats and Republicans in the legislature agree with the concept of the lockbox, but they disagree with how it should look. And I had the opportunity to go to the state treasurer's financial outlook meeting a couple weeks ago, and they had a forum with the House Speaker as well as the House Minority Leader. Era Sinowitz is the House Speaker from Southington, and Clarides is from Derby.
She's the Republican.
Yeah. And Ben Barnes, who's the OPM director, commissioner, was also on this panel. But one of the things that did come up was the transportation lockbox, and both the elected officials were in agreement with this idea of the lockbox, but Clarides was against the idea that money can be drawn out of it that wasn't funded from gas taxes or tolls or whatever it was. There's other funds that go in. There's general fund revenues that go in there, and that seems to be the breakdown right now. That the Republicans really want, as soon as it goes in there, it doesn't ever leave except for transportation, even if it wasn't a transportation-specific revenue. And the Democrats are taking a different, which I think is a more practical approach, that if there's a need to pull out money, you can only pull out the money that was put in through these other mechanisms. But I don't see it happening this year. That's my interpretation.
It's funny, and I don't want to represent Commissioner Rediker's position, but he seemed to have a different take on the lockbox. He didn't necessarily think that it was that useful, I don't think. He didn't give me the feeling that he was sold on how, because he seemed to think that most of the money, transportation money, was already earmarked and couldn't be diverted. And that was sort of a different take on it. So he didn't seem to think that that was going to significantly solve the problem.
And one thing you had hinted
Which would put
at-
him, if
Yeah.
I read it right, that's why I don't want to misrepresent him, but it was
Yeah.
sort of put him at odds at the way his boss, the governor, speaks about it. He seems to think that lockbox has to come first.
And
Yeah.
something you hinted at also is, can revenue from tolls or revenue from gas tax, would it only go towards road maintenance, or could it go to transportation alternatives?
Right.
That
And
would-
if 60% of his budget is dealing with commuter trains and buses, then, you would hope that some of that revenue is going to be able to be directed there and take the pressure off of that, which.
Well, I think even if you just consider if there were tolls or there was other revenue from vehicles, from cars that were going into the trust fund, that right now what happens if they have a shortfall in revenues, just whatever the revenue is, they have two options. They can cut their costs or they can raise fares. They don't have the option of raising the gas tax or raising a toll or raising registration fees. So what has happened now in the current situation is that their solution to, we don't have enough money because we're not getting gas tax revenues like we thought, is raise fares. So I'm just thinking, if we had a system where we had tolls and other funding sources from cars, well, that money may not go to rail or to buses. You might not have to raise fares as much for those, which in the long run I think will help ridership as well.
Now, one small detail I just thought of when you were talking about capital, costs and operating costs, weren't we supposed to get new cars, and whatever happened to that?
It's funny because I had a photo in the slide deck. This was a slide deck other than the ridership numbers that I used a year ago, and the slide was, we're getting new cars, we're getting new train cars, and that has been delayed until at least the start of the Hartford line, which is scheduled to open in January of 2018, so that's 6 to 8 months, 7 months away. And I don't know beyond that.
Okay. I was just curious.
I had to say that learning, kind of hearing about the way that DOT was presenting it, it's coming now, we're just start testing, and it just kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed. And then a few months ago, they finally gave a kind of a different answer, and it just seems like, okay, so it sounds like you didn't plan to put these cars in service until several years from now anyway, and that was very frustrating.
But they were purchased years ago.
Yes, and they're in service on Metro North.
These are like the M9s?
The M8s.
Yeah.
The M8s? Okay.
Yes.
All right, so they're in service, but are you talking about another? That's
But
what I
not
was
for
getting.
Shoreline East.
They were supposed to be for Shoreline East service.
Oh, okay, so we didn't get,
We didn't
Right.
get them. Someone got them. But
Somebody
Right.
got them, but there is another order of M8s coming. So that was they're getting some bar cars and some other things. But the latest I've heard, and maybe there'll be an update next week. The latest I've heard is that they're supposed to come after the Hartford line opens, because the cars and the locomotives are on Shoreline East are supposed to move to Hartford line, and the Hartford line, as far as I've heard, is still opening next January. So.
another opportunity for justifying the expansion of Shoreline East is the L&M Yale merger. There's going to be a lot more, back and forth from New Haven to New
That's
London
true.
because of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So-
Well, I think anytime we could find ways to make connections between urban hubs, I think our economy does better. Kind of my CCD hat on, downtown businesses and downtown property owners really would benefit from greater service, just because it makes their storefronts more marketable. It makes their upper stories more marketable, which makes it more likely that they will invest in the improvements to either have residents up there or to have businesses up there. So really, the service is a great benefit to the city of New London, and those interconnections are really important.
And I think in general, all the urban hubs would benefit from this. went to a program about energy usage in various states, and Connecticut uses a lot of energy in transportation, and it's partly, I think, because we developed in kind of a suburban, we don't have any huge urban hubs. We have a lot of small towns, and people are used to driving from one to the other. So, this in the long run could be very helpful for our general energy usage. Well, we have about 5 minutes left, so I think we should spend it telling people or giving people suggestions about what to do, starting with next week's meeting, but any other suggestions for how we should advocate for our rail here?
You're looking at me.
I'll start. Just
We'll both stare at you.
To plug it again, the Connecticut Commuter Rail Council has their April meeting at 6 p.m. in City Council chambers, 3rd floor of City Hall, next week, Wednesday on the 19th. Not only are there members of the Rail Council there, but there's also representatives from DOT. There's always efforts to get somebody from Amtrak. They usually don't show up, but there's at least representatives from DOT. People can ask specific questions, and there is a good chance that they will actually get an answer. And I think that's, regardless of what the question is, getting those answers is important. So really, it's an opportunity to interface with the people who are actually running the rails and the volunteers from across the state to hear how important Shoreline East is. And I have to say, the rail councilors really enjoy this meeting because it's actually a fairly positive meeting. A lot of times when the meetings they have, if there is any public input, and it's usually very limited, it's usually unhappy customers. So
down in the world where they actually have commuter
Yes.
service, so
Right.
they can complain about
Right.
why
the great service they
silly
have.
things like, why can't you move this train schedule 3 minutes earlier?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Problems we wish we had.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think Rana's suggestion is another spot. I mean, I think we need to build up our grassroots political muscle by connecting the cities along the line, from Old Line to New London and Mystic, and put pressure on our state legislators to really focus on this, because I'm not sure anybody is really focused on it. If the chart you saw the ridership, we have to engage the ridership. I mean, I think we have to do more political engagement in order to get some attention here. And it's going to be so important for southeastern Connecticut. I mean, it's easy to justify. If southeastern Connecticut, we have the highest unemployment in the state. We have, so many issues here that, especially the Gold Coast, just the complete opposite, right? Give us trains, and that will give us the economic opportunity that we need. Connect us. I mean, we're between New Haven and Providence. Connect us to New Haven and Providence, and perhaps we won't be such a wasteland here.
Right. And I mean, not only connecting to jobs in those locations, but really then finding ways to bring people here. I mean, housing in southeastern Connecticut is less expensive than it is along the rest of the shoreline. And that, you don't have to draw a lot of people for that to be seen. We're not we're 27,000 people. We're not that big. If you draw a handful of people, you are making a positive impact on the community. And I think that's another way to really try to find a way to market that, but we need the service first.
Is there any particular place that people can go online, or places where local folks can ask what points we really need to be made, other than people's individual experiences, if they come to the Rail Council and they want to advocate?
So the Rail Council has a Facebook page. So if you look up the Connecticut Commuter Rail Council, you will find you should find them on Facebook. There's also a Shoreline East Riders and Supporters Facebook page as well, which is a New London focused page. It's monitored regularly, so if anybody has questions, there's opportunities to ask questions and say, okay, how can we engage, or how can I make the right connections? Those are two.
Yeah. So I do recommend that people go to that meeting next week. I was at the meeting last year. It was really interesting. People did really come from Mystic and Stonington and East Lyme, and both elected officials and riders and community members. So it's important.
Yeah, so we have to really make an effort. We have a week to get the word out, so I think really getting the word out about the meeting is going to be important.
And city council chambers, all of you who come to city council meetings all the time, you know where you can find it.
Yeah, and we should probably make arrangements to stream it.
Oh, that's a good
turn
idea.
on
Yeah.
the feed.
So if that happens, it'll be announced on Connecticut Riders and whatever,
Yep.
that Facebook page.
The Store on East riders
Yes.
and supporters, yes.
Well, we're out of time. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Tim. And hopefully we'll see you all at the meeting next week. And on next Tuesday, I won't be here. Michael Harris is going to host, and he'll be interviewing a couple of shoreline greens, Owen Charles and Jim Connolly. So I'll be back in 2 weeks, but hopefully next Wednesday you'll all be there, right? Good night, and thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hosanna.